The dust cloud rising from the road told Clara Brennan that trouble was coming. And when she shaded her eyes against the harsh Arizona sun that July morning in 1883, she could make out 3 riders heading straight for her homestead with the kind of purpose that made her heart sink like a stone. She had been expecting this for weeks now, ever since Silas Thornton had started spreading his poison through town, claiming her land deed was fraudulent and that her late father had never properly filed the claim before his death 6 months ago. Clara stood on the porch of the small ranch house her father had built with his own 2 hands, her calico dress already dusty from the morning chores, and felt the weight of everything she stood to lose pressing down on her shoulders. At 23 years old, she had already buried both parents, survived 2 harsh winters, and learned to shoot straight enough to keep the coyotes from her chickens. But she had never faced anything like what was coming. The riders pulled up in front of her house, and Clara recognized the tall, thin man in the middle as Marcus Webb, the land agent from Tucson. Flanking him were 2 of Thornton's hired men, rough-looking characters with guns on their hips and sneers on their faces. Webb dismounted with the air of a man performing an unpleasant duty, pulling a folded paper from his vest pocket. "Miss Brennan," he said, not quite meeting her eyes, "I have here a notice of disputed claim. Mr. Silas Thornton has presented evidence to the territorial court that this property was never legally registered to your father, Jeremiah Brennan, and that the land reverted to public domain upon his death. You are hereby notified that a hearing will take place in Tucson in 14 days to determine the rightful ownership of this quarter section." Clara felt her blood run cold despite the blazing heat. "That is a lie, and you know it, Mr. Webb. My father filed that claim in 1879, and we have been working this land ever since. He has the deed, signed and registered. Then you will need to present that deed at the hearing," Webb said, his voice apologetic but firm, "along with any other documentation you might have." "I am just delivering the notice, Miss Brennan. The judge will make the final determination." "Thornton just wants my water rights," Clara said, her voice shaking with anger. "Everyone knows the spring on my property is the best source for miles. He has been trying to buy me out for months, and now that I will not sell, he is trying to steal it through the courts." One of Thornton's men, a barrel-chested brute with a scar across his cheek, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Maybe you should have taken Mr. Thornton's generous offer when you had the chance, little lady. A woman alone out here trying to run a ranch, that is not natural. This land needs a man's hand." Clara's fingers itched to reach for the rifle leaning just inside her doorway, but she kept her hands steady at her sides. "This land has my hand, and that is all it needs. Now you have delivered your notice so you can get off my property." Webb tipped his hat, looking uncomfortable. 14 days, Miss Brennan, in Tucson. Do not miss that hearing or the judge will rule in Thornton's favor by default." He mounted his horse and the 3 men rode off, leaving Clara standing alone in a fresh cloud of dust. She waited until they were out of sight before she allowed herself to sink down onto the porch steps, her legs suddenly weak. 14 days. She had to find her father's deed, gather whatever other papers she could, and somehow convince a judge that she had the right to keep the land that was her entire life. The problem was, her father had been a man of action rather than paperwork, and she was not entirely sure where he had kept all the official documents. She had been through his things after his death, but in her grief, she might have missed something crucial. Clara spent the rest of that day tearing through every trunk, every drawer, every possible hiding place in the house. She found letters, old bills of sale for livestock, her mother's recipes written in fading ink, but the land deed itself remained frustratingly elusive. By the time the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, Clara sat surrounded by piles of papers in the middle of the floor, fighting back tears of frustration. She knew she could not do this alone. She needed help, and she needed it from someone who understood the law and the way men like Thornton operated. The problem was, She did not have money for a lawyer, and even if she did, most of the attorneys in Tucson were either already in Thornton's pocket or unwilling to take on a case for a woman with no resources. That night, Clara barely slept. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance and trying to make a plan. By morning, she had decided on her only course of action. She would ride into the nearby town of Mesquite Springs, about 15 miles south, and seek out anyone who might be willing to help her. Her father had mentioned friends there, other ranchers and homesteaders who had fought their own battles with land grabbers and claim jumpers. Maybe one of them would know what to do. She rose before dawn, fed and watered her small herd of cattle, tended to the chickens, and saddled her mare, a sturdy bay named Juniper. Clara dressed in her most practical riding clothes, packed what documents she had found into a leather satchel, and set out as the first light of morning broke across the desert. The ride to Mesquite Springs was hot and dusty, but Clara had made it many times before with her father. The town itself was small, just a main street with a handful of businesses, a saloon, a general store, and a church. Clara tied Juniper to the hitching post outside the store and went inside, hoping to find some information. The store owner, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Patterson, greeted her with concern when Clara explained her situation. "Oh, my dear, that is terrible. Thornton is a snake, pure and simple. He has been gobbling up land all over this territory, and he does not care who he hurts doing it." She thought for a moment, then her face brightened. "You know, there was a cowboy through here just yesterday, asking about work. He mentioned he had some experience with legal matters, said he used to work for a big ranch operation up in Wyoming and had to deal with all sorts of land disputes. Name was Cole Hartley, I think. Tall fellow, dark hair, very polite." Clara felt a flicker of hope. "Do you know where I might find him?" He was heading over to the Silver Star Saloon, looking for information about ranches hiring. "You might try there." Clara hesitated. She was not in the habit of going into saloons, especially not alone, but desperation made people do things they might otherwise avoid. She thanked Mrs. Patterson and crossed the dusty street to the Silver Star. The saloon was quiet this early in the day, with only a few patrons nursing drinks at scattered tables. Clara stood in the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the dimmer light, and scanned the room. At a corner table sat a man who matched Mrs. Patterson's description. He was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that were a striking shade of gray. He wore dusty trail clothes and had the lean, weathered look of a man who had spent most of his life outdoors. Clara squared her shoulders and walked over to his table. "Excuse me, are you Cole Hartley?" The man looked up and his eyes widened slightly in surprise. He stood immediately, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Yes, ma'am, I am, and you are Clara Brennan. I own a ranch north of here and I am in serious trouble. Mrs. Patterson at the general store said you might have experience with land disputes and legal matters. I need help and I need it desperately, but I have to be honest with you, I cannot pay much. I can offer food, a place to stay, and whatever small wages I can scrape together, but that is all." Cole studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling that those gray eyes were seeing right through to her desperation. But when he spoke, his voice was kind. "Why not you sit down and tell me what is going on, Miss Brennan?" Clara sat, and the whole story poured out of her. She told him about her father's death, about Thornton's attempts to buy her out, about the notice of disputed claim and the hearing in Tucson in less than 2 weeks. She explained that she could not find the original deed and that she was terrified she would lose everything her family had worked for. Cole listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Thornton," he said finally. "Silas Thornton. Big man, runs a massive spread east of Tucson, always wearing fancy suits." Clara nodded. "You know him." "I know of him. I worked on a ranch in Wyoming that had dealings with some of his business partners. He has a reputation for exactly this kind of thing, using legal technicalities and corrupt officials to grab up land. The man is ruthless, and he usually gets what he wants. He paused, then met her eyes. But that does not mean we cannot fight him. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. Cole smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. I left Wyoming because I was tired of seeing big operations crush smaller ranchers under their boots. I was looking for work anyway, and your cause sounds a lot more interesting than just punching cattle. Besides, I might actually be able to help you. I worked as a foreman for 5 years, and part of my job was dealing with land claims, water rights, and territorial disputes. I am not a lawyer, but I know my way around the system. Why would you do this for a stranger? Clara asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Cole's expression grew thoughtful. Let us just say I have seen too many good people lose everything to men like Thornton, and I would like to see that change. And you are not asking for charity. You are offering fair work for fair pay. That sits right with me. Clara felt a weight lift from her chest that she had been carrying since the moment those riders appeared on her horizon. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet, Cole said. We have a lot of work ahead of us. First thing we need to do is find that deed, or find proof that it was filed even if we cannot locate the original document. When did you say your father registered the claim? 1879. March, I think. Then there should be a record at the Territorial Land Office in Tucson. Even if Thornton has bribed some officials, those records are public, and there are multiple copies kept in different locations. We will need to go to Tucson and do some digging. He stood, placing his hat back on his head. But first, let us get back to your ranch and see what other documents you have. Sometimes the devil is in the details, and we might find something useful you overlooked. They rode back to Clara's ranch together, and she found herself stealing glances at Cole as they traveled. He sat his horse with the easy grace of a man who had been born in the saddle, and there was something solid and dependable about him that made her feel, for the first time in months, that maybe everything would be all right. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara showed Cole the stacks of papers she had pulled out the day before. He settled himself at her kitchen table and began to go through them methodically, reading each document carefully. Clara made coffee and tried to keep herself busy, but she found herself watching him work, noting the careful way he handled her father's things, the furrow of concentration between his brows. After about an hour, Cole sat back with a small sound of satisfaction. Found something. Clara hurried to his side. What is it? It is a receipt. Look here. He pointed to a faded piece of paper. This is a receipt from the Territorial Land Office dated March 15, 1879, for the filing fee for a quarter section claim in this exact location. It has your father's name on it, and it is stamped by the land office. This proves that your father did file a claim. But is that enough without the deed itself? It is a start. This receipt proves intent and initial filing. What we need to do now is get to Tucson and search the land office records for the deed itself. If Thornton is claiming the land was never properly registered, we need to prove otherwise. And if the original deed has somehow disappeared from the records, which would not surprise me one bit given Thornton's resources, then we need to find other proof. Witness testimony from other ranchers who knew your father filed the claim, surveyor reports, tax records showing your family has been paying property taxes on this land. Clara sat down heavily in the chair beside him. This is all so complicated. It is, Cole agreed. But that is why you need someone who knows how to navigate it, and we have 12 days before that hearing. It is tight, but we can do this. He looked at her with those steady gray eyes. I will not lie to you, Miss Brennan. This is going to be a fight, and Thornton has a lot of advantages. But you have something important too. You have the truth on your side, and you have a legitimate claim to this land. We just have to make sure the judge sees that. Over the next few days, Clara and Cole worked together preparing for the trip to Tucson. Cole proved to be an enormous help around the ranch, fixing things her father had left undone, helping with the heavy work, and showing a quiet competence that made Clara grateful beyond words. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and talking long into the evenings about strategy for the hearing. Clara found herself looking forward to these evening conversations more than she wanted to admit. Cole had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that surfaced at unexpected moments, making her laugh despite the seriousness of their situation. He told her stories about his years working ranches from Wyoming to Montana, about the characters he had met and the places he had seen. In turn, Clara found herself opening up about her own life, about the loneliness of the past 6 months, about her fears for the future. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Cole said something that had been on his mind. "You have done an amazing job keeping this place running on your own. Your father would be proud." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at the words. "I am not sure about that. There is so much I do not know, so much I am still learning. Some days I feel like I am barely holding it together." "Strength is not about never feeling scared or uncertain," Cole said quietly. "It is about keeping going even when you do, and you have been doing that every single day since your father passed. That takes real courage." Clara turned to look at him in the fading light, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that made her heart beat a little faster. She had known this man for less than a week, but already she felt more connected to him than she had to anyone in years. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses, and both of them stood quickly, alert to potential danger. But it was just her nearest neighbor, Tom Richards, an older rancher whose land adjoined hers to the west. He rode up to the porch with a worried expression. "Clara, I heard about the trouble with Thornton. I wanted to come by and see if there is anything Mary and I can do to help." Clara introduced Cole, explaining that he was helping her prepare for the hearing. Tom shook Cole's hand with approval. "Glad she has got someone in her corner." "Thornton is a wolf, and he has been circling this area for months." He turned back to Clara. "I want you to know I will testify at that hearing if you need me to. Your father and I filed our claims around the same time, and I was there the day he went to the land office in Tucson. I remember it clear as day. I will swear to that before any judge." Clara felt tears threaten again. "Tom, that would mean so much. Thank you. Your father was a good man and a good neighbor. I will not stand by and let Thornton steal from his daughter." Tom tipped his hat. "You need anything else, you send word. Mary wanted me to tell you that you are both welcome for supper any time." After Tom left, Cole turned to Clara with a smile. "There is your witness testimony, and I would bet there are others who would stand up for you too. You have more support than you realize." Clara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of hope. "You are right. My father knew a lot of people in this territory. We should make a list of everyone who might be able to help, everyone who knew about his claim." They spent the next hour doing exactly that, and by the time they went to bed, they had a list of nearly a dozen people who might be able to provide testimony or documentation supporting Clara's case. The following day, they prepared for the journey to Tucson. It was a 3-day ride, and they needed to get there with enough time to search the land office records and meet with anyone else who might help. Clara packed supplies, and Cole checked their horses, making sure everything was ready for the trip. As they were loading the saddlebags, Clara found herself watching Cole again, admiring the capable way he moved, the strength in his hands. She caught herself and looked away quickly, but not before Cole glanced up and their eyes met. He smiled, and Clara felt her cheeks warm. They set out early the next morning, riding south through the Arizona desert. The July heat was intense, and they traveled in the early morning and late evening hours, resting during the worst of the afternoon sun. Cole proved to be good company on the trail, pointing out interesting features of the landscape, telling stories that made the miles pass more quickly. On the second evening, they made camp near a small creek, one of the few reliable water sources in the area. As Clara prepared a simple meal over the fire, Cole tended to the horses, then settled beside her watching the flames. "Can I ask you something personal?" Clara said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Sure. Why did you really leave Wyoming?" "You said you were tired of seeing small ranchers get crushed, but I feel like there is more to it than that." Cole was quiet for a long moment, and Clara thought maybe she had overstepped, but then he spoke, his voice low. "There was a family, the Mitchells. They had a small spread not far from the ranch where I worked. Good people, 2 kids. The big outfit wanted their land, and they used every dirty trick in the book to get it. False accusations, legal harassment, even some violence. I tried to help them, did what I could, but I was just a foreman and my bosses did not want me getting involved. In the end, the Mitchells lost everything and had to leave with just what they could carry." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I realized then that I did not want to work for operations like that anymore. I wanted to be on the side of the people trying to hold onto their piece of ground, not the side trying to take it away." Clara felt a surge of emotion at his words. "That is why you are helping me." "That is part of it," Cole admitted. He looked at her, and in the firelight his eyes were warm. "But I will be honest, Clara, it is not just about the land anymore. These past few days, working with you, seeing how hard you fight for what is yours, how you have built a life out here against all odds. You are a remarkable woman, and I find myself caring about what happens to you." Clara's breath caught. The air between them seemed charged with something electric, and she found herself leaning slightly toward him. "Cole, But before she could finish the thought, they heard the sound of horses again, several of them, approaching their camp fast. Both Clara and Cole were on their feet instantly. Cole's hand going to the rifle he kept near his bedroll. 3 riders burst into the circle of firelight, and Clara recognized them immediately. They were Thornton's men, the same 2 who had accompanied the land agent to her ranch, plus a 3rd man she did not know. All 3 had guns drawn, the scarred man from before sneered at them. Well, Miss Brennan and her new friend. Mr. Thornton thought you might try something like this, heading to Tucson to stir up trouble. He sent us to deliver a message." Cole stood between Clara and the riders, his stance deceptively relaxed but his eyes hard. "We are on public land, causing no trouble. Whatever message Thornton has can be delivered at the hearing. The message is simple," the scarred man said. "Miss Brennan needs to withdraw her claim and sell the land to Mr. Thornton for a fair price. Otherwise, things are going to get unpleasant. Accidents happen out here in the desert. People disappear all the time." Clara stepped forward despite Cole's protective stance. "I am not withdrawing anything and I am not selling. That land is mine by right and no amount of threats will change that." The 3rd man, a younger fellow with mean eyes, laughed. "You hear that, boys? The lady has got spirit. Maybe we should teach her some respect." Cole's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You are going to turn those horses around and ride out of here right now. If you do not, you are going to find out that I am a lot less friendly than I look." The scarred man studied Cole for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if the cowboy was all talk or if he could back it up. Something in Cole's eyes must have convinced him, because he lowered his gun slightly. "This is not over. Mr. Thornton always gets what he wants one way or another. You would be smart to remember that. And you would be smart to remember that threatening people and trying to intimidate witnesses is a crime," Cole shot back. "The territorial marshal might be very interested to hear about this conversation." The 3 men exchanged glances, then wheeled their horses and rode off into the darkness, leaving Clara and Cole standing by the fire. Clara found that she was shaking, and Cole turned to her immediately, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I think so. I have just never had anyone threaten me like that before." "I will not let anyone hurt you," Cole said, and the intensity in his voice made Clara look up at him. In the firelight, his face was serious, protective, and something else, something that made her heart race. "I promise you, Clara, I will not let Thornton take your land or harm you in any way." "Why?" Clara whispered. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Cole's hands tightened on her shoulders, and for a moment Clara thought he might pull her closer. "I think you know why," he said softly. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings and possibilities. Then Cole stepped back, though his eyes never left hers. "We should get some rest. We have a long day ahead of us tomorrow, and after this, we know Thornton is playing for keeps." They bedded down on opposite sides of the fire, but Clara lay awake for hours, her mind replaying Cole's words and the look in his eyes. Something had shifted between them tonight, something profound, and she knew with sudden certainty that whatever happened with the land, her life was never going to be the same. They reached Tucson late the following afternoon, tired and dusty from the trail. The territorial capital was a bustling town, much larger than anything near Clara's ranch, with adobe buildings lining wide streets and people of all descriptions going about their business. Cole led them to a modest boarding house run by a Mexican woman named Señora Garcia, who offered them clean rooms at a reasonable price. After washing off the trail dust and changing into fresh clothes, they headed directly to the Territorial Land Office, which was housed in a sturdy building near the courthouse. A clerk, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, greeted them with bureaucratic efficiency. "We need to search the land claim records for March 1879, Cole said. "Specifically, a claim filed by Jeremiah Brennan for a quarter section in the northern part of the territory." The clerk looked at them with thinly veiled boredom. "Those records are available for public inspection. However, it will take some time to retrieve them from the archives. Come back tomorrow morning." "This is urgent," Clara said. "We have a hearing in just a few days, and we need those records." "Everyone thinks their business is urgent, miss," the clerk said dismissively. "The archives are in the basement, and it will take hours to locate specific files from that time period. Come back tomorrow, and I will have them ready for you." Cole leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on an edge. "We will pay for the expedited service." $20 if you can have those files ready by tonight." The clerk's eyes widened at the mention of money. $20 was a significant sum. "Well, I suppose I could make an exception in this case. Come back at closing time, 6 o'clock, and I will see what I can do." They left the land office and spent the rest of the afternoon tracking down some of the other people on their list who lived in Tucson. They found 2 former neighbors of Clara's father who remembered the family and the land claim, and both agreed to provide written statements supporting Clara's case. A surveyor who had worked in the area also agreed to testify that the Brennan property was a legitimate claim with proper boundaries. By the time they returned to the land office at 6 o'clock, Clara was feeling more hopeful than she had in days. The clerk was waiting for them, but his expression was odd, uncomfortable in a way that made Clara's stomach sink. "I have the files from March 1879, the clerk said slowly. "But there is a problem. The claim filed by Jeremiah Brennan is not here. In fact, there is no record of that claim at all." Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. "That is impossible. We have the receipt. My father filed that claim," the clerk shrugged. "I am just telling you what is in the files. Or rather, what is not in the files. There is no deed, no registration, nothing with the name Brennan on it." Cole's expression had gone hard. "Those files have been tampered with. Someone removed that deed." "That is a serious accusation, sir." "These records are carefully maintained and monitored, and they can also be bribed or bought, especially by someone with enough money and motivation." Cole pulled out the receipt Clara had found. "This is proof that the claim was filed. The deed should be in those files." The clerk barely glanced at the receipt. A receipt is not the same as a deed. Without the actual registered claim, there is nothing I can do. They left the land office in a state of frustration and growing anger. Back at the boarding house, Clara paced her small room while Cole sat thinking, his jaw tight. "Thornton got to those files," Clara said, her voice shaking. "He removed the deed. How are we supposed to fight that?" "We fight it by proving the corruption," Cole said. "That clerk was lying." I could see it in his eyes. Thornton either paid him to remove the deed or did it through someone else with access to the files. What we need is proof of the tampering or enough other evidence that the judge has no choice but to rule in your favor despite the missing deed. How do we get that in just a few days? Cole stood and took her hands in his, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past week. We do not give up. Tomorrow we talk to every official, every old-timer, every surveyor and land agent who was working in Tucson in 1879. Someone will remember your father's claim. Someone will have records or testimony that can corroborate what we know to be true. And we gather every piece of evidence we can find, every tax record, every survey map, everything that shows your family has been living on and working that land for 4 years. Clara looked up at him, drawing strength from his steady presence. I do not know what I would do without you. You will not have to find out, Cole said softly. His thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that made her shiver. I am not going anywhere, Clara. Not now, not when this is over. Not unless you tell me to. Clara's heart soared at those words, at the promise implicit in them. I would never tell you to go, she whispered. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, and Clara knew that whatever happened in the days ahead, she had found something precious in this cowboy who had walked into her life when she needed him most. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of activity. Cole and Clara interviewed dozens of people, tracked down dusty records in courthouse basements, and pieced together a picture of her father's claim that was as complete as they could make it without the deed itself. Tom Richards rode into Tucson to provide his testimony, as did 2 other neighboring ranchers. They obtained a surveyor's map from 1880 that clearly showed the Brennan property with its boundaries marked. They found tax records proving that Jeremiah Brennan had paid property taxes on the land for 3 consecutive years before his death. Cole also did some digging into Thornton's background, and found that this was far from the first time the man had used legal manipulation to acquire land. There were at least 5 other cases in the past decade where Thornton had challenged claims, often successfully, and in several instances, the original deeds had mysteriously disappeared from the land office records. On the evening before the hearing, Cole and Clara sat in a quiet corner of the boarding house dining room, going over their strategy one final time. They had everything organized, every piece of evidence cataloged, every witness prepared. But they both knew it might not be enough. The judge will be the deciding factor, Cole said. Judge Harrison has a reputation for being fair but also for being a stickler for proper documentation. The fact that we do not have the actual deed is going to be a problem. But we have so much other evidence, Clara protested. How can he ignore all of it? He should not be able to. But judges have been known to make questionable rulings, especially when men like Thornton are involved. Cole reached across the table and took her hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, Clara, know that we did everything we could. And this is not necessarily the end. If the ruling goes against us, we can appeal. An appeal would take months, maybe years, and Thornton would have control of the land in the meantime. Clara felt despair creeping in. I could lose everything. Listen to me. Cole's voice was firm and he squeezed her hand. You are not going to lose everything. Even if the worst happens, even if somehow we lose the land, you still have your strength, your courage, your ability to build a life. You have survived loss before, and you will survive it again if you have to. But I do not think it is going to come to that. I think we are going to walk into that courtroom tomorrow and show that judge exactly what kind of woman you are and what kind of snake Thornton is, and we are going to win. Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were not entirely tears of fear anymore. You have given me so much hope, not just about the land, but about everything, about the future. Cole stood and moved around the table to her side. He pulled her gently to her feet and wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. You have given me something too, he said softly, purpose. A reason to believe that fighting for what is right actually matters, and something else, something I was not looking for but found anyway. What? Clara whispered, a place to belong, a person to care about more than anything else. His eyes searched hers. Clara, I know this is not the time or place I would have chosen for this conversation, and God knows tomorrow is going to be hard enough without complications, but I need you to know. These past 2 weeks, working beside you, getting to know you, seeing how brave and strong you are, I have fallen in love with you, completely and totally in love with you. Clara's breath caught, and her heart felt like it might burst. Cole, I have fallen in love with you too. I think I started falling that first day in the saloon when you agreed to help me without even knowing me. And every day since, you have shown me what it means to have someone truly in my corner, someone who sees me as capable and strong but is still there to support me. I love you. Cole pulled her into his arms then and kissed her. It was a kiss full of promise and passion, of fear and hope all tangled together. Clara melted into him, letting herself feel everything she had been holding back for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Cole rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said, we face it together, and when this is over, if you will have me, I want to stay on your ranch. I want to work that land with you, build a life with you, maybe raise a family someday if you want that too. I want all of it, Clara, everything with you. Yes, Clara said, her voice full of emotion. Yes to all of it. I want that too, more than anything. They held each other in that quiet corner of the dining room, drawing strength from each other for the battle that lay ahead. The morning of the hearing arrived with the weight of destiny. Clara dressed in her best dress, a dark blue cotton with a white collar that her mother had made years ago. Cole wore the only suit he owned, a simple dark affair that made him look different, more formal but no less strong. They walked to the courthouse together, carrying their carefully organized folders of evidence and testimony. The courtroom was already crowded when they arrived. Clara recognized several people in the gallery, including Tom Richards and the other ranchers who had come to support her. On the opposite side of the room sat Silas Thornton, looking every bit the wealthy rancher in an expensive suit with a gold watch chain. He was flanked by 2 lawyers, sleek men in fine clothes who radiated confidence. Judge Harrison entered the courtroom, and everyone rose. The judge was an older man with a weathered face and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He settled himself behind the bench and called the hearing to order. We are here to determine the rightful ownership of the quarter section known as the Brennan property, located in the Northern Territory, the judge said. Mr. Silas Thornton has challenged the claim of Miss Clara Brennan, asserting that the land was never properly registered and has reverted to public domain. Miss Brennan contests this assertion. Mr. Thornton, as the challenger, you will present your case first. Thornton's lead lawyer stood, a silver-haired man named Blackwood. Your Honor, the facts of this case are simple. My client has made a thorough search of the Territorial Land Office records and has found no deed, no registration, no official documentation whatsoever showing that Jeremiah Brennan ever properly filed a claim for this property. While Miss Brennan may have been living on the land without proper legal registration, she has no legitimate claim to ownership. The land is therefore in the public domain and available for claim, which my client wishes to file. The judge looked at Clara. Miss Brennan, I understand you do not have legal representation. Clara stood, her legs trembling slightly. No, Your Honor, but I have Cole Hartley here with me. He has experience with land disputes and has been helping me prepare my case. The judge nodded. Mr. Hartley, you may assist Miss Brennan, but you understand you cannot act as an attorney since you have no legal credentials. Cole stood beside Clara. I understand, Your Honor. I am here as a friend and advisor. Proceed then. Miss Brennan, present your case. Clara took a deep breath, and Cole gave her an encouraging nod. Your Honor, my father did file a legal claim for that land in March of 1879. We have a receipt from the land office proving the filing fee was paid and the claim was submitted. She handed the receipt to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Harrison examined the receipt carefully. This shows a payment was made, but it does not prove a claim was registered. Do you have the actual deed? No, Your Honor, and that is because someone has removed it from the land office files. We believe Mr. Thornton or someone working for him tampered with those records. Thornton shot to his feet. That is an outrageous accusation with no basis in fact. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Thornton, sit down. You will have your chance to respond. He turned back to Clara. That is a serious allegation, Miss Brennan. Do you have proof of this tampering? Cole stepped forward. Your Honor, we have evidence of a pattern. In the past 10 years, Mr. Thornton has challenged at least 5 other land claims in this territory. In 3 of those cases, the original deeds mysteriously disappeared from the land office records, just as Miss Brennan's deed has disappeared. This pattern suggests systematic tampering with official documents. Blackwood was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor, that is speculation and hearsay, not evidence. My client has engaged in legitimate legal challenges to disputed claims. It is not his fault if some homesteaders failed to properly file their paperwork. Cole did not back down. It is not hearsay when there is a clear pattern of behavior, Your Honor. We have documented each of these cases and can provide details. The judge held up his hand. I will allow the information, but I need more than patterns and coincidences, Mr. Hartley. Do you have direct evidence that the Brennan deed was properly filed and then removed? We have substantial circumstantial evidence, Your Honor. Clara spoke up, her voice growing stronger. In addition to the receipt, we have testimony from 3 ranchers who witnessed my father filing the claim in 1879. We have a surveyor's map from 1880 that clearly shows the Brennan property with established boundaries. We have tax records showing my father paid property taxes on that land from 1880 until his death last year. We have bills of sale showing my father purchased livestock and equipment specifically for use on that property. All of this proves that my father treated the land as his legal property because it was his legal property. She handed stack after stack of documents to the bailiff, and the judge began reviewing them. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of papers. Clara could feel her heart pounding, and Cole's steady presence beside her was the only thing keeping her calm. Finally, the judge looked up. This is substantial documentation. Mr. Blackwood, how do you respond? Blackwood shuffled through his own papers. Your Honor, while Miss Brennan has certainly been living on the land, none of this documentation proves a legal claim was ever filed. Tax records, bills of sale, even witness testimony about what people think they remember from 4 years ago, none of it replaces a properly filed deed. Except that there was a properly filed deed, and it has been stolen from the records, Cole said, his voice hard. Your Honor, we request that you order an investigation into the land office records and the clerk who has been managing them. We believe you will find evidence of corruption. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, thinking. That is a serious request and one that would take time to fulfill. However, I am troubled by the receipt Miss Brennan has presented. This is an official document from the land office showing that a filing fee was paid by Jeremiah Brennan on the date in question. In my experience, the land office does not issue receipts for filing fees unless a claim is actually filed. Furthermore, the accumulated evidence of continuous occupation, improvement of the land, and payment of taxes suggests that the Brennan family believed in good faith that they had a legal claim. Thornton whispered urgently to his lawyer, and Blackwood stood again. Your Honor, even if we accept that a claim was filed, Miss Brennan is not Jeremiah Brennan. The claim, if it existed, was in her father's name. Upon his death, without a will and without proper transfer of the property, the claim would have lapsed. Clara felt her stomach drop. They had been so focused on proving the claim existed that they had not adequately prepared for this argument. But Cole was already speaking. Your Honor, under territorial law, property passes to direct descendants in the absence of a will. Miss Brennan is Jeremiah Brennan's only child and his sole heir. She has a legal right to inherit his property, including his land claim. That is true if the property was legally his to pass on, Blackwood countered, but without the deed, we cannot establish that. The judge held up his hand again. Gentlemen, Miss Brennan, I have heard enough for now. This is a complex case with evidence and arguments on both sides. I am going to call a brief recess to review all the materials presented. We will reconvene in 1 hour, at which time I will hear final statements and render my decision. The gavel came down, and the judge retreated to his chambers. Clara sank into her chair, feeling drained. Cole sat beside her, his hand finding hers under the table. "You did beautifully," he said softly. "You presented the case clearly and with strength. Now we wait and see." Tom Richards came up to them during the recess, along with several other supporters. "You are giving them a good fight, Clara. Your father would be proud." Clara tried to smile, but she was too nervous. The next hour felt like the longest of her life. She and Cole stood outside the courthouse, going over their final statement, making sure they had covered every point. When the bailiff called them back inside, Clara felt like she was walking to her own execution. The courtroom settled, and Judge Harrison took his place at the bench once more. His expression was unreadable, and Clara's hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. "I have reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today," the judge began. "This is indeed a complex case that touches on issues of proper documentation, inheritance rights, and the integrity of our public records. However, several facts are clear to me. First, Miss Brennan has presented an official receipt from the Territorial Land Office showing that a filing fee was paid by her father for a land claim on the property in question. This is an official government document and carries significant weight. Second, the accumulated evidence of continuous occupation, improvement of the land, payment of taxes, and witness testimony all support Miss Brennan's assertion that her father believed in good faith that he had a valid legal claim. Third, Miss Brennan, as the sole heir of Jeremiah Brennan, has a legal right to inherit his property." The judge paused, and Clara held her breath. "The absence of the deed from the land office records is troubling, and I am not satisfied with the explanations offered for its disappearance. While I stop short of making findings about tampering without a full investigation, I note that such investigations have merit and should be pursued by the appropriate authorities. In cases where the official record is incomplete or questionable, the law allows me to consider the preponderance of evidence presented. In this case, that preponderance clearly favors Miss Brennan." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes, and Cole's hand tightened on hers. "Therefore, I rule that the land claim originally filed by Jeremiah Brennan is valid, and that the property in question legally belongs to his heir, Miss Clara Brennan. Mr. Thornton's challenge is denied, and Miss Brennan's ownership is confirmed. Furthermore, I am ordering the Territorial Land Office to issue a new deed in Miss Clara Brennan's name, documenting her legal ownership of the property. This deed will be filed and recorded properly, with duplicate copies maintained in multiple locations to prevent any future disappearances." The gavel came down with a sharp crack and the courtroom erupted. Clara turned to Cole, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she sobbed against his chest, all the fear and tension of the past weeks pouring out of her. "You did it," Cole said into her hair. "You won." Tom Richards and the other ranchers crowded around, offering congratulations and back slaps. Across the courtroom, Silas Thornton stood with a face like thunder, speaking in harsh whispers to his lawyers. Clara caught his eye for just a moment, and she saw the fury there, but also the defeat. He had lost, and in a very public way. As they left the courthouse, Cole kept his arm around Clara's shoulders, and she leaned into his strength. They walked back to the boarding house in a daze, Clara still unable to quite believe what had happened. In the privacy of her room, she finally let herself fully react. "We won," she said, saying it out loud to make it real. "Cole, we actually won." I get to keep my land, my home, everything my father worked for. You fought for it and earned it, Cole said, smiling at her with such warmth that Clara felt her heart overflow. You stood up to a powerful man and proved that right matters more than money or influence. I have never been more proud of anyone in my life. Clara threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with all the joy and relief and love coursing through her. Cole responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Can we go home now? Clara asked. I want to see my ranch, my land, and know that it is really mine. We can go home, Cole agreed. We will stay tonight, get the new deed from the land office tomorrow to make everything official, and then head back. And Clara. He took her hands in his, suddenly serious. When I said I wanted to stay with you, to build a life with you, I meant it. I know we have not known each other long, and if you want to wait, I will understand. But I also know that what I feel for you is not going to change. I love you and I want to marry you if you will have me. Clara felt fresh tears, but these were tears of pure happiness. I do not want to wait. I have spent the last 6 months alone, wondering if I would always be alone, if I would ever find someone who saw me as a partner and an equal. And then you walked into my life and everything changed. Yes, Cole Hartley, I will marry you. I will marry you and spend the rest of my life loving you and working beside you and building something wonderful together. Cole kissed her again, a kiss full of promise and passion. Then let us make it official as soon as we get home. We can have the pastor from Mesquite Springs come out to the ranch, and we can get married with Tom and Mary and whoever else wants to come as witnesses. Nothing fancy, just the two of us making promises to each other. That sounds perfect, Clara said. Absolutely perfect. They spent that evening making plans, talking about the future, imagining what their life together would look like. Cole told her about improvements he wanted to make to the ranch, ways to expand the herd and make the operation more profitable. Clara shared her dreams of turning the ranch into something her father would have been proud of, a legacy they could pass on to their own children someday. The next morning, they went to the land office together. A different clerk was working, a nervous young man who had clearly heard about the previous day's ruling. He produced the new deed with almost comical speed, properly filled out and stamped, with Clara's name written in clear, bold letters as the legal owner of the property. Clara held the document carefully, this precious proof of her right to the land, and Cole watched with a smile. Now it is truly yours, he said. No one can ever take it away. They began the journey home that afternoon, riding north through the desert with lighter hearts than they had carried on the way down. The landscape looked different to Clara now, brighter and full of possibility. She kept glancing over at Cole, still hardly believing that she had not only kept her land but found love in the process. 3 days later, they rode up to Clara's ranch in the late afternoon sun. Everything looked exactly as they had left it, but somehow it felt different, better, like coming home after a long absence. Clara dismounted and stood for a moment, just looking at the house, the barn, the corrals, the land stretching out in all directions. Mine, she said softly. Really and truly mine. Ours, Cole corrected gently, coming to stand beside her. If you want it to be ours. Clara turned to him with a smile. Ours, I like the sound of that. Over the next week, they fell into a routine that felt natural and right. Cole proved to be everything Clara had hoped for in a partner, working hard but also knowing when to laugh, when to talk, when to simply be together in comfortable silence. They sent word to the pastor in Mesquite Springs, and he agreed to come out to the ranch the following Sunday to perform a wedding ceremony. Clara invited Tom and Mary Richards, along with a few other neighboring families. Mary helped Clara make a new dress for the occasion, a simple but pretty calico in a soft green that brought out the color of her eyes. Cole borrowed a proper suit coat from Tom, and on the appointed Sunday, they stood together in front of Clara's house with their small group of friends and neighbors gathered around. The ceremony was short and sweet, the pastor speaking about love and partnership and the sacred bond of marriage. When it came time for the vows, Clara looked into Cole's gray eyes and spoke from her heart. I vow to love you, to work beside you, to build a life with you that honors the past and embraces the future. I vow to be your partner in all things, to support you and stand by you no matter what challenges come. You saved my land, but more than that, you saved me. You showed me that I did not have to face the world alone. I love you, Cole Hartley, with my whole heart. Cole's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke his own vows. I vow to love you, to protect you, to honor the strength and courage you have shown me. I vow to make this ranch a home for both of us, to work this land and cherish it the way you do. You gave me a purpose and a place to belong, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking a chance on a cowboy who walked into a saloon one day. I love you, Clara, more than I have words to say. They exchanged simple gold bands that Cole had purchased in Tucson, and when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her as the sun set behind them in a blaze of orange and gold. Their friends cheered, and Mary wiped away happy tears. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful, with food and music and laughter. As the stars came out overhead, Clara and Cole slipped away from the party and walked out to the edge of their property, where they could see the spring that had started all the trouble with Thornton. All of this because of water, Clara said, shaking her head. Thornton wanted this spring so badly he was willing to cheat and steal. He saw value in something precious, Cole said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He just went about it in the wrong way. The land, the water, they are worth fighting for, but not like he fought. The right way is what we did, standing up for truth and justice and working hard to build something good. Clara leaned back against him, feeling completely content for the first time in longer than she could remember. I cannot believe how much my life has changed in just a few weeks. I went from thinking I would lose everything to having more than I ever dreamed of. We both did, Cole said, pressing a kiss to her temple. I was drifting, Clara, going from job to job, never really settling anywhere. And then I met you, and suddenly I knew exactly where I was meant to be. They stood there for a long time, watching the stars and talking about their plans. They would expand the cattle operation, maybe add some horses. They would repair the barn roof before winter and add a room to the house for the family they both hoped to have someday. They would work hard, but they would also make time to enjoy what they had built, to ride out together across their land and appreciate the life they were creating. The years that followed were not always easy, because life on a ranch in the Arizona Territory never was, but Clara and Cole faced every challenge together. They survived drought years and good years, fought off the occasional cattle rustler, dealt with difficult winters and scorching summers. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything else manageable. 2 years after their wedding, Clara gave birth to their first child, a healthy baby boy they named Jeremiah after Clara's father. Cole was beside himself with joy and proved to be a devoted father, carrying the baby around the ranch and talking to him about horses and cattle, and the land they would pass on to him someday. When Jeremiah was 3, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah, who had her mother's determination and her father's gray eyes. The house rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, and Clara often thought about how empty and quiet it had been before Cole came into her life. Tom and Mary Richards became like family, their own children growing up alongside Clara and Cole's kids. The network of small ranchers in the area supported each other, sharing labor during busy times and standing together against larger outfits that tried to push them out. They heard from time to time about Silas Thornton. His empire eventually crumbled, brought down by the same dishonest practices that had nearly cost Clara her land. An investigation into the land office, prompted by Judge Harrison's ruling, had uncovered widespread corruption, and several of Thornton's associates ended up facing criminal charges. Thornton himself avoided jail but lost much of his wealth and influence. Clara found that she could not take satisfaction in his downfall. She was too busy being happy with her own life to spare much thought for the man who had tried to destroy it. Cole proved to be everything Clara had believed him to be and more. He was her partner in the truest sense, making decisions with her, respecting her opinions, and never trying to diminish her role in running the ranch. He was patient with the children, teaching them the skills they would need to thrive in this harsh but beautiful land. And he was a loving husband, finding ways every day to show Clara how much he cherished her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they took a rare evening away from the children, leaving them with Tom and Mary, and rode out to the spring where they had stood on their wedding night. The landscape had not changed much, but they had. There were lines around Cole's eyes now, and Clara's hands were rough from years of hard work, but the love between them had only deepened. "Do you ever think about that day in the saloon?" Clara asked, sitting beside Cole on a large rock near the water. "When I walked up to your table and asked for help." "I think about it all the time," Cole said, taking her hand. "I think about how close I came to saying no, that I was not interested or too busy. If I had made a different choice that day, I would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me." "I think about it too," Clara said. "I was so desperate and scared, not knowing what was going to happen, and you gave me hope when I had none left. You fought for me and believed in me when I was not sure I believed in myself." Cole pulled her close. "We fought together and we won together, and we have been winning together ever since." They sat there as the sun set, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment, who had built a life that was worth all the struggles it had taken to get there. The ranch prospered under their care, becoming known throughout the territory as a well-run operation. Their children grew strong and capable, learning from both parents the values of hard work, integrity, and standing up for what was right. Jeremiah showed an aptitude for working with horses, and by the time he was 15, he was breaking and training mounts that were sought after throughout the territory. Sarah inherited her mother's head for business and kept the ranch accounts with meticulous care, making sure they were always prepared for lean times. As Clara moved into her 40s, she sometimes looked back on that terrifying time when her whole world had hung in the balance, when a corrupt man had tried to steal everything she had. She thought about the cowboy who had defended her claim before the judge, who had helped her keep her land. And she thought about how she had given him her whole heart in return, and how that had been the best decision of her life. Cole's hair was going gray at the temples now, and he moved a little slower after a long day's work, but to Clara, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him in that saloon. The love between them had matured into something deep and abiding, built on years of trust and partnership and weathering life's storms together. On a warm evening in the spring of 1898, 15 years after that fateful hearing in Tucson, Clara and Cole sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their children were grown now, Jeremiah courting a young woman from a neighboring ranch and Sarah helping to run the daily operations of the property. The ranch was prosperous and paid for, the land secure in their name with no one left to challenge it. "We did all right, did not we?" Clara said, leaning her head on Cole's shoulder. "We did more than all right," Cole said, wrapping his arm around her. "We built something real and lasting. We raised good kids. We made this land into something your father would have been proud of, and we loved each other through all of it." "I still remember how scared I was that day the land agent showed up with Thornton's men," Clara said. "I thought I was going to lose everything." "But you did not," Cole reminded her. "You fought and you won, we won." "Because of you," Clara said, turning to look at him. "You could have ridden on by, could have stayed out of it, but you chose to help me. You changed my whole life." Cole smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way that always made Clara's heart warm. "You changed my life too. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stay in one place and put down roots. You gave me your whole heart, Clara, and I have tried every single day to be worthy of that gift." "You have been," Clara said softly. "You have been more than worthy. You have been everything I needed and more than I ever hoped for." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon. Two people who had found each other in the midst of a crisis and built a lifetime of love from that difficult beginning. The land spread out around them, their land, worked with their own hands and watered with their own sweat. The house behind them was full of memories, of children's laughter and quiet evenings and 1,000 small moments that made up a life well lived. As the stars began to appear overhead, Clara thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. She thought about her father and the legacy he had left her, about the fight to keep that legacy alive, and about the cowboy who had stood beside her and made himself part of that legacy too. She thought about the judge who had ruled in her favor despite the missing deed, about the friends and neighbors who had supported her, about the community they had all built together in this harsh and beautiful land. But most of all, she thought about Cole, about the man who had walked into her life when she needed him most and never left. The man who had defended her claim before the judge, who had helped her keep her land, and to whom she had given her whole heart without reservation or regret. "I love you," she said, the words as true and powerful as they had been the first time she had spoken them all those years ago. "I love you too," Cole replied, holding her close. "Always have, always will." They sat together as the night deepened around them, two souls who had found each other and built something beautiful together, their love story written in the land they had fought for and the life they had created. The Wild West was changing, becoming more settled and civilized with each passing year, but here on their ranch, the values that had brought them together still held true. Hard work, integrity, loyalty, and love, these were the things that mattered, the things that lasted. In the years that followed, Clara and Cole grew old together, their love deepening with each passing season. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation and passing on their stories and their wisdom. They watched the territory change around them, eventually becoming the state of Arizona, but their ranch remained a constant, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together. When Clara was 65, Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep one winter night, his hand clasped in hers. Clara mourned him deeply, but she also took comfort in the life they had shared, in the decades of love and partnership and joy they had known together. She lived another 10 years, staying on the ranch with her children and grandchildren around her, and when she finally joined Cole in the small cemetery they had established on a hillside overlooking their land, she went peacefully, knowing that she had lived a full and remarkable life. The ranch passed to their children and then to their grandchildren, the land staying in the family for generations. The story of how Clara had fought to keep her claim, and how a cowboy named Cole Hartley had defended her before a judge, became part of the family lore, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and what their ancestors had overcome. The spring that had caused so much trouble still flowed clear and cold, providing water for the cattle and the family who tended them. The house that Jeremiah Brennan had built with his own hands still stood, added onto and improved over the years, but fundamentally the same. And though the Wild West of Clara and Cole's youth was long gone, replaced by roads and towns and modern conveniences, the spirit of what they had built together lived on. Their love story, forged in crisis and strengthened through years of partnership and devotion, became the foundation on which generations built their lives. It was a story of courage and determination, of fighting for what was right, of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build a life together. It was a story of how a cowboy defended a woman's claim before a judge, how she kept her land against all odds, and how she gave him her whole heart in return, creating a legacy that would endure long after they were both gone. The land remembered them, in the way that land remembers those who love it and work it and fight for it. The spring still bubbled up from the earth, the cattle still grazed the hills, and the house still stood strong against the desert sun. And in the hearts of their descendants, the story lived on, a reminder that true love and true courage could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the greatest treasures in life came from the darkest moments of struggle and fear. Clara had stood on her porch that July morning in 1883, watching trouble ride toward her and not knowing how her story would end. But in the end, it had ended beautifully, with love and land and a lifetime of memories that proved that fighting for what mattered was always worth it. She had kept her land, yes, but more importantly, she had found her partner, her love, her home in the person of Cole Hartley. And that, more than any legal deed or judge's ruling, was the real victory, the real happy ending that made all the struggle worthwhile. Their story was one of many in the Wild West, but it was special because it was theirs, because they had lived it together and created something lasting from the chaos and uncertainty of frontier life. They had loved each other completely, worked together tirelessly, and built a life that honored the past while embracing the future. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for, all anyone could hope for, a life well lived with the person you loved by your side, facing whatever came together and emerging stronger for it. The sun set on their story as it had set thousands of times over their land, painting the sky in brilliant colors that faded to gentle twilight and then to starry night. But the love that Clara and Cole had shared did not fade. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the land they had fought for and nurtured, and in the story that would be told for generations to come. A story of courage and love, of fighting for what was right and never giving up, of two hearts that found each other in the midst of a storm and held on tight through everything that followed. It was a story of the Wild West, of a time when the land was harsh and the challenges were many, but also a time when love could flourish in the most unlikely circumstances, when a chance meeting in a saloon could lead to a lifetime of happiness, and when standing up for what was right could change not just one life but the lives of generations to come. It was Clara and Cole's story, and it was beautiful.